Hello and welcome to the programme. A Dutch Court of Appeal has set June the 11th as a tentative date for the decision on the return of the Scythian gold collection to Ukraine. Now, the collection was on display in the Netherlands when Russia illegally annexed Ukraine's Crimea. Back in 2016, a Dutch court ruled in favour of sending the finds to Kyiv. Later, the Russian occupation authorities in Crimea filed an appeal. Now, to talk more about this case, we welcome to our studio today Serhiy Petukhov as Deputy Minister of Justice of Ukraine on European integration. Hello, thank you for coming in.
Good, thanks. Hello.
My first question is, you were in Amsterdam yourself and you've just come back. So how would you assess your arguments, I guess, and what is the likelihood in your view, now that you've just come back, that Ukraine could get back this Scythian gold collection?
Now, we have a strong case. That's why we won the first instance, which is based on the fact that under international law, as well as the Ukrainian national legislation, these artifacts, this Scythian gold collection, is the property of the state. And that is how they are recognized internationally. And therefore, given the fact that Crimea is occupied by Russia, the collection has to be returned to the state of Ukraine, and by decision of the Ministry of Culture, should be kept temporarily in Kyiv until the deoccupation of Crimea. And therefore, we do believe that we have a strong case, and we hope that the Court of Appeal will follow the same logic as the first instance court. We have not heard any new evidence or arguments submitted by the opposing side, and therefore we're looking with optimism towards the decision that is to be rendered by June 11th.
Yeah, and can you tell us a bit about this sort of phantom entities from Crimea who are representing their side? Because I find it even surprising that they were even allowed perhaps to put their point across, given they're not a state.
Right. So there was an interesting line of defense that the Crimean side took. They filed a case with four Crimean museum as plaintiffs, but these were the museum being Ukrainian legal persons, whereas in fact right now they do not exist in Crimea, and the museums that are operating right now under the Russian occupational authorities are the Russian museums, Russian legal entities, that are managing the whole property of the museum and all of collection. So in fact what happened in the Dutch court, there were the phantom Ukrainian museums that do not exist in Crimea anymore, and they were asking to give them back the collection that would be transferred to completely different Russian legal entities. And that was the argument that we were making. And interestingly enough, they were basing their claim on Ukrainian legislation. So that is kind of a hybrid approach that I guess was not appreciated by the court of first instance.
Yeah, and can you, I mean, this story has gone on for 5 years now, so can you tell us a bit more about the importance of this Scythian gold?
Right. Now, this collection that was brought first to Germany and then to the Amsterdam is a unique collection of the Scythian artifacts of the people who populated Crimea and northern part of the Black Sea shore more than 1,000 years ago. And they represent a rich cultural heritage of Ukraine, going back to those times where, it was populated by different peoples, going through Ukraine, through the steppes of Eastern Europe, back and forth. And they are important to give us more information about what happened in this period of time, but also they are beautiful objects of art. And what is important to us is that Russia, in its public discourse, claims that Crimea has always been Russian, and there was no other history in Crimea except for the time when it was colonized by Russia. In this way, erasing the history of other peoples, specifically of Crimean Tatars, who are indigenous people of Crimea. And therefore, it is important to show to the world that Crimea, has been populated, many years before the first Russian soldier, put a foot on its territory, and it has a rich cultural background. It has indigenous people that have, that call it home and have no other place to go, and it also has an important Ukrainian heritage and culture there.
And can you tell us a bit more about the international organizations? Because I would imagine that you dealt with UNESCO. I think they have some law about, it was from 1972. I believe it was.
Now, the Ukrainian claim is based on the UNESCO Convention of 1970 that regulates, among other things, the exploitation of the cultural heritage.
Yes.
And it clearly states that it should be returned to the state of origin. And in support of our claim in the court, we've provided the expert opinions of the most learned professors that are sort of, dealing with the cultural heritage law. And this is a unanimous position in international relations that this, the state has the primary obligation to ensure that the cultural heritage is preserved. And we take it as the right of Ukraine, but also as an obligation to preserve the cultural heritage of Crimea as it is known, to us now.
And we know that a lot of it is being destroyed at the moment in Crimea, not the Scythian Gold.
And also that was another point that we were making, that currently in Crimea, the Russian authorities are destroying certain important objects and artifacts. For example, the Bakhchisarai Palace, the place of the central seat of the Crimean Tatar rulers, is being actually destroyed now under the sort of
the guise of restoration.
Right.
Almost.
The restoration, the way it's been done, is done unprofessionally and pretty much destroys the historical ensemble, the historical truth about the palace.
So is this actually an argument that you could use in your case as well with the Scythian Gold?
Well, we did use it in order to show that what's actually happening in Crimea is different from the rosy picture that Russia is trying to present to the outside world. We've we've presented to the court the documents from UNESCO that has been concerned about this, what's going on in Crimea with respect to the cultural heritage and buildings. And this, of course, does matter for the court because it does not make sense to return the cultural heritage to a place where it will never be preserved and has a danger of being destroyed.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, there's quite a few pieces, isn't there, stored in the basement? It's 500
plus.
Yeah, 560.
The other danger that we've actually also informed the court about is that Russia has traditionally had this policy of removing the objects of art and culture to Moscow and St. Petersburg, using various pretexts to be stored there indefinitely. And there are still lots of Ukrainian cultural heritage objects that are presented in Moscow, St. Petersburg, as if they were part of the Russian cultural heritage. And therefore, returning this collection to Crimea would also run a danger of it being removed from Crimea to Russia.
Yeah, and I mean, apart from the UNESCO one, are there other international conventions that help your case? Now,
yeah. Also, we have to remember that Russia is recognized internationally as the military occupant of Crimea, and so the international humanitarian law comes into play, which, apart from regulating the rules and customs of war, has a specific provision on the protection of the cultural heritage. And therefore, Russia has an extra obligation as an occupying power to preserve the cultural heritage that is on the peninsula, and to return it to Ukraine in the state that the state where the way it was after the deoccupation.
And it must take quite a lot of work to build one of these cases, considering you have to have a lot of experts, people from the government. I mean, who was involved in building this case to try and get the Scythian Gold collection back?
No, it's the collective effort from various ministries and agencies led by the Ministry of Justice. We've had a Dutch law firm working for us on, and also a Ukrainian law firm that was hired in order to present the evidence and arguments based on Ukrainian, Dutch and international law.
Yeah. Oh, perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming in. It was a pleasure, and hopefully we'll have you back in the studio in June, and we'll see what happens. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was Serhiy Petukhov, Deputy Minister of Justice of Ukraine, on European integration. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more.